Reload! Oh, how I miss games telling me to reload. Vampire Knight on the PS2. This game showed up in the big box of games sent to me by my girlfriend for the show, and this one's actually pretty special because unlike everything else in that box, I have no earthly clue what this game was. And it was pretty interesting. Now, I gotta go in and just full disclosure, this is a light gun game, and I do not own a light gun, I do not own a CRT. There's a grand total of one game that would make me go out to get those things. This one ain't it. So I'm playing this with a controller, which is not how you should be playing this game, so I'm giving the suboptimal experience here. But to try and balance it out, I set it to very easy and gave myself some extra credits and lives, and it's still really hard. But yeah, I'm not exactly playing this with the most intended experience. Now the story to Vampire Knight is, well, I cannot actually possibly convey the depth and complexity of the entire story myself. I think the best thing I can do is let the game speak for itself. And according to the game, the plot is...
Wait! Who are you?
We hunt the creatures of the dark. Vampire hunters.
That's your lot, really. It is a light gun game. It's not trying to be a deep or interesting or thought-provoking game. It's more like, this is an avenue to make an excuse to give us something to shoot at, really. And in that regard, it does give you the arcade experience, I suppose. But in terms of story, there's not really much. There is a little bit here and there with the annoying little girl who follows you around and really should just stop getting in your way, but she doesn't. And a few of the bosses have some character development as you fight them, but really, it's really not a game for story. The story to this game is pretty woeful, but it's an arcade game. That's not really the point. The point is, of course, gameplay. Well, that and stealing as many quarters as it possibly can. And it's quite good at that. Now, the gameplay to this one is actually pretty deep for a light gun game, and the controls to this game couldn't be simpler, at least with a controller. You move the crosshair with the control stick, one button shoots, one button reloads. You don't have to aim off screen, which I have played a few controller-based light gun games and had to do that. That's awkward. Just alternate your buttons and you are perfectly fine. There's even a speed up button on the controller. That's actually really, really innovative. Again, considering what you're working with. The biggest focus of this game, and it seems like a very obvious thing for a light gun game, but it's precise shooting. Again, it seems obvious for a light gun game, but this game kind of takes it to an extreme. A great example of this is shooting bits of environment for power-ups. This is a standard thing in any light gun game, but even if you have your cursor right on top of the power-up you're shooting at, you'll probably not get it. For whatever reason, the hitbox of your bullets is ridiculously small, like smaller than your actual like dot sight on your reticle. And I think the just hitboxes of bits of the environment and the actual power-ups themselves are really, really small. Another great example of how precise the shooting is, to a point where it's kind of to this game's detriment, is the second boss. This game does bosses great, but the second boss is kind of terrible. He's this fast-moving flying guy who basically flies off into the horizon, and you're expected to shoot him a bunch of times before he hits you in order to nullify his attack. It is kind of ridiculous to try and do that. Now, again, I'm using a controller, so if you're actually using a light gun, your mileage may vary, but it's still kind of taken precision to an extreme. However, on the brighter side of this, it still emphasizes precision in a more sensible way with literally every enemy in the game. Every enemy has a weak point that can pretty much take them out in one shot. And what's even cooler, to further emphasize precision, this game kind of gets rid of civilians entirely, which is great. I find those characters obnoxious in light gun games. They just get in the way, and yet they're still here. They're turned into like these zombies with like these octopus things latching onto them, and you have to shoot them off the civilians to save them, at which point they give you like a bonus or whatever. And on the flip side, if you miss, like literally anywhere, then the little octopus slug turns them into a full-fledged monster that you have to shoot like 4 times in his weak spot to take out. So not only do they sort of emphasize precision and kind of reward you for it, but they heavily punish you if you get it wrong. But it's an enjoyable balance all the same. I really like how they handled the civilian mechanics in this game. Now, another thing in this game that actually makes it pretty interesting, although not different from too many light gun games, alternate routes. On 3 of the levels, there are alternate paths depending on how quickly you act and where you shoot. For example, on level 2, there's a moment where the little child who's following you for reasons I still cannot fathom, seriously, you're just in the way, she almost gets kidnapped by this monster. If you manage to shoot the monster off before she gets kidnapped, well, then you take a slightly different route, whereas if you end up waiting till afterwards, you have to then go chase after her because, well, you gotta go save the little girl who's constantly throwing herself into danger because that's a sensible child right there. But the fact that there's multiple routes and multiple ways to handle enemies and better ways to handle enemies in terms of precision and bonuses and just a rewarding experience in general really does make you want to play this game more and more. And I mentioned this briefly with the bosses, but you know, except for the second boss and maybe the final one, because I couldn't quite get to the final boss, all the bosses are a ton of fun. The first boss is this guy with this giant sword who you have to like shoot down his sword slashes before they get to you. Or, like the third boss is this guy who makes clones of himself and you have to sort of differentiate and act quickly. And all the bosses have this really interesting mechanic as to how to defeat them. Because on the top of the screen when you fight a boss, you'll see like this big blue health bar. And underneath it, you'll see this little red one. The little red one is basically a small mini health bar for the individual attack phase. And if you manage to empty out that attack phase health bar, you basically interrupt their attack so they can't attack you, or you get them into their next phase or whatever. That said, you're not exactly married to these attack phases in order to attack them yourself. You can attack them when they're not attacking you. You'll just do significantly less damage. For reasons I'm not entirely sure why they get a huge defense buff, but still, it's nice you can just dump bullets into your opponent when you're not waiting for them to wail on you. And in addition to the standard mode, there's also a mission mode. Now I couldn't get very far into this mode because the second mission, I don't know if I just misinterpreted the instructions or it bugged out on me, but essentially before your characters walk into the first area of the game, a random NPC will stop them and give them a mission. The first example I got was find a dolly that you find at the bottom of the snow slope. Well, I did that. And then you just shoot the doll and boom, mission complete. That's great. I love that. I love that it recontextualizes your adventures and adds like extra hidden things that you have to kind of look out for, and it actually makes the main game almost a secondary thing entirely. That is an incredible amount of depth. Now, one thing I didn't like about it, however, was after I completed that mission, it still made me play through the entire campaign again like normal. So the missions don't necessarily confine you to the actual required mission area. And like I said, they gave me an instruction for the second mission, and even though I thought I did exactly what it asked, nothing happened. So yeah, the missions are a little bit strange. There's also an equipment and store menu, which allows you to utilize all the money that you theoretically got from pots that you shot out in the adventure, although, again, the hit detection's a little bit iffy on this. And you can buy all sorts of stuff, including shotgun shells, which of course makes your gun more of a shotgun spread, and even a thing that actually makes your hit detection bigger, which is good because I really think you need that. So this game really does handle kind of every sort of problem you could ever have. And heck, even if you're using a controller, there's a speed up option on the actual control pad, as well as an in-menu speed up adjustment, as well as the ability to pick from one of like 12 different sites for some reasons. Seriously, this game gives you a ton of options and a ton of different ways to try and enjoy and modify your experience. So if you're not enjoying it one specific way, there's pretty much something for anyone. And that's a lot of fun. Combine that with the sort of really laughably bad story and sort of camp humor and just sort of insanity of it, and you kind of have, in terms of gameplay and story, sort of like this nice alternative to, say, House of the Dead. And I really like that. Now, the overall presentation to Vampire Knight is actually really impressive. I love the visual design. There are great environments. The bosses and monsters are all really creative, and there are some moments that just made me think, you know, this game is actually pretty breathtaking for the time. It looks quite great. Now, where it maybe falls a little bit short is the audio design, however. Now, the music itself is fast-paced, it's actiony, it's actually really, really good. The voice acting, however, isn't what you'd call quality. However, again, because it feels like it's trying to be sort of a House of the Dead, really cheesy arcade shooter, it's not bad. I mean, don't get me wrong, the voice acting as a whole is really terrible, but it sort of fits the really bad sort of B-movie vibe it's going for. So even though it's not the most quality voice acting ever, it's quite suitable, leading to a pretty solid presentation. Again, depending on whether you take this game seriously or sort of more like as a parody sort of thing. I happen to see this game more as a parody, so I'm going to give the voice acting a thumbs up. Now, if you want a copy of Vampire Knight on the PS2, well, cheapest one I'm seeing right now, well, North American anyway, is $25, which seems a little bit high. I'm pretty sure this actual copy wasn't anywhere near that expensive. And of course, once again, I have to give a huge shout out and thank you to my girlfriend for sending this to the show and once again helping to continue to allow me to do the things that I do. But I got to admit, if you like light gun games, kind of like House of the Dead or even Ghost Squad, games that are, very much light gun games, but light gun games that are goofy and sort of awkward, and not necessarily taking itself seriously, but just having an enjoyably dumb time just shooting bullets at monsters and other crazy insanity, I think this one's kind of a must-have. Yeah, it's always going to be in the shadow of, again, the well-known House of the Dead, but you know what? This has great, awkward B-movie charm, terrible voice acting that fits it so well, and some really solid shooting mechanics. The only thing I don't like about it, honestly, is just how small your actual bullet's collision is. But on the other hand, that just provides more and more of a challenge, especially if you want to work on your aim. Again, it would work better with a light gun, certainly, but even for a controller, it's a pretty fun time. I think this game is a great B-movie of a light gun shooting game. Don't let the vampires scare you off, because this game, it's pretty damn good. There we go. Oh, let's beat this guy. Ah. Not quite there yet.